Hi guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I've chosen to do a full colour along in a fairly new book and an uncoloured book for myself by the artist Sara Szewczyk. I think that's how you pronounce it, and the book is called Spooky. And the page I've chosen to do is the Fox Witch page, a terrarium page, which I found Fox really cute, and so I was drawn to this page. I was drawn to many pages, but I decided to settle on this page. I think this is the first colouring book by this artist, and I think the art style is so beautiful. It's so different, and I was really excited to get started in this book. I haven't coloured, obviously, any of her work, and the paper quality in this book is meant to be the same as Maggie and Terrio's, I think, Flowerscapes books, and I haven't coloured in that book either. And so I really was eager to see what the paper would feel like, because when I was flipping through this book, yes, the paper felt stunning. It felt so nice and smooth and beautiful to work on. So I was hoping that would be the case. And I was definitely not disappointed at all. I loved the bright white paper. I loved how my pencils felt on the paper. And I have used, as always, my Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils. I activated it with water. I used them dry. And I loved how they worked. So along with my pencils, the only other things I think I used was a bit of paint pen work, possibly very little glitter gel pens, and right at the end of the video, which you won't see on screen, as always, I'll do it off screen, is a little bit of sprinkling, well, a little bit more than I wanted to, sprinkling of Winsor & Newton, no, sorry, not Winsor & Newton, Arteza Metallic watercolour paints in maybe 2 or 3 colours, so a couple of greens and a pink. And that's it. Very simple with the media that I'm using basically on this page. I didn't think it needed much more. And I sort of had a vision for this particular page. For some reason, I could imagine bright greens for the background, and I thought that would look lovely with the fox, a reddish, like a tan coloured fox fur. And so I was really drawn to using green and orange, and then I just worked with that in mind and decided to do the rest of the page. I've kept it a very limited colour palette, but I think I love how it has turned out. So as always, the first thing I do is colour the background. I first coloured the background of the terrarium inside the jar basically. And then once I'd completed that, I suddenly got an idea that I wanted to do a little bit of a background outside the jar as well. At first I thought I was going to leave it with no background. I thought it would be perfectly fine. Just that standalone line art would be good. But the idea that came to my mind was just doing a little bit of sort of watercolor effect, splashing of the green that we've used within the jar on the outside of the jar too. But I didn't want to fill up the whole page with colour or with the background. I wanted to just do little bits of it. And so I decided to try out, and you'll see me try it out first on the sort of the top left side of the jar, a little bit of a watercolor paint splash effect, but I used my pencils to try and create that effect, and I think I liked how it looked. And so then I went ahead and did a little bit more around the jar, just to give a little bit of something to the background outside the jar. I was really happy with how this looked. I loved the greens that I've used, because I don't usually use all the bright greens in my Faber Castell set. I tend to use the yellowy greens or the olivey greens for my usual colouring pages, and I steer away from bright green colours usually, especially for leaves and grass and trees, things like that. And so it was so nice trying to use some of my brighter greens in the set, and I like the brightness that it gave to this particular illustration. Once I'd done the background, I went ahead and started working on the elements that are inside the terrarium, inside the jar, and I started with trying to figure out what colors I was going to bring in. Other than the orange or tan fur that I wanted to use, I was thinking what other colors would work, and I knew my first instinct is always to go for pink. Pink and green go wonderfully together, but I wanted to try and not use pink as much as possible, and so I decided to first start, I think I colored the leaf on the left hand side within the jar, and then the flowers that are on top of the jar I decided to try and do a yellow. I thought yellow might work with the green as well. It'll give a little bit more brightness. Not that the page needed any more brightness, but it'll give a bit of more brightness, and it won't steer too far away from like the orangey fur I'm going to do and the greens that I was going to use for the leaves, which was going back to my usual greens that I tend to use for leaves. And so yeah, I decided to use yellow for the flowers, and I think that worked. I think the yellow, green and the orange that I had in mind was looking like it would work really well. So I tried to keep the palette limited to those particular colors. Like I said, the greens I used for the leaves, I tried to differentiate it from the background greens because I didn't want them to disappear, and at the same time I didn't want to take away from the brightness of the background that I had created. And so yes, my leaves turned out a little bit darker, but then for certain elements within the jar I used the similar greens that I'd used in the background just to bring in a little bit of that bright green background colors into the foreground, and I think that worked well. It just broke up a little bit of the dark greens, and I loved how the greens worked together. Then before I carried on with any of the other elements within the jar, I decided to color the fox because I knew what color I wanted the fox, and before I decided and started bringing in lots of other colors by mistake, because that's what tends to happen with me, I decided, let me color the fox first and get my oranges in, and then I'll be able to see the picture better and decide what other colors need to be brought in, if any. And the other reason is I find fur challenging, and so I wanted to get the fox done so then I could carry on with the rest of the page and just relax and do the rest of the page because it's such a simple page otherwise. I think the most challenging elements on this page is the fur, for me, is the fur, and to create the glass effect. And those are the two things. The rest of the elements are nice, relaxed colouring. So I went ahead and did the fox fur, and I liked how that looked. And then I decided to do the hat. Now, the witch's hat, or the fox's hat, I wanted to do, the fox witch's hat, I wanted to do, at first, I thought I was going to do like a dark purple. But then I decided I don't want to introduce that much more colour, and so I just made it a black hat with sort of hints of blue to it, just to give it a little bit something else, not just a flat black colour. And so that's what I decided to go for the hat. I knew I wouldn't, if I used that colour, I wouldn't need to bring in that colour anywhere else on the page. So yeah, I stuck to just a simple hat. And then as I was finishing off the interior of the jar, I obviously ended up bringing in a little bit of pink to the page. But I think it works. It just breaks up all those yellows, yellow greens, bright greens, oranges. I think the pink just sort of gives it a little bit of pop of colour. I didn't bring that much. I controlled myself, but I did bring a little bit just to break up those colours. Once I finished the interior of the jar, then I had to work on the flowers and leaves that are outside the jar. And at first I thought I was going to bring the pink. Once I started introducing the pink on the inside of the jar, I was like, okay, my flowers on the outside are going to be pink. But I controlled myself and I decided, no, I think the yellows will look a lot nicer and will not stand out too much. Your eyes won't get drawn to those particular flowers. You want the eyes to be drawn to the contents of the terrarium rather than the outside elements. And if I did pink, it would, draw your eyes to the bright pink colors I use. So I decided to just go for yellows and keep it quite subtle. And I love how it looked. That was all my pencil work done. I loved how all the colors worked together. And I forgot to mention, as always, I'll be showing little portions of how I color certain elements and then I color the rest of it off screen. It makes the video shorter for you guys, but also I get a little bit of relaxing time, not worrying about having to show you know, the colors throughout the video, and I get to listen to something and watch something while I color as well, because I don't get that much coloring time. So yeah, I try and do both. I show you little elements that are repetitive on the page and then go off and color it in my own time. So hopefully you guys are okay with that. So that was my pencil work done, and I'm really glad with how the pencil work turned out. I'm glad I managed to keep the palette fairly limited, because that is usually quite a hard task for me. I never follow color palettes, for example, color palette challenges, because I find it a real challenge to stick to color palettes, and to limit myself to the colors I'm using. And so it was nice trying to keep this limited. It was a simple page, so it was a nice page to try and practice that aspect of coloring, just sort of limiting the number of colors you're using on a page. Following the pencil work, there were certain elements you will notice that had not been coloured. I just went ahead with my glitter gel pens to fill up those little spaces. I like to do that for little tiny elements, just to bring a little bit of shine to my pages. Very little compared to a lot of people, but I do like to fill in a little bit of sparkle. And I then went ahead and did my paint pen work. The paint pen work is just sort of an addition. I just covered up a few black lines to give a bit of a highlight, but the main area where the paint pen work was important was the actual jar, to make it look like it's a glass element, to cover up those black lines and make it look like it is glass. And in real life, you don't have harsh lines to a see-through or transparent glass element. And so, yeah, I decided to cover up those black lines, and I think that worked wonderfully. And I just added a few white paint pen marks on the actual jar to, again, make it look like it's sort of reflecting light, to give highlight areas, again, to make it look like it is a jar, and everything we've colored is within the jar as contents of the jar. So hopefully that came across. And that was it. Then at the end of the video, I sometimes like to do a bit of sprinkling on my pages, whether it's with white ink or a little bit of metallic paint or metallic ink. So this time I chose to use my Arteza Metallic watercolor paints. I only have one set of watercolor paints, and I decided to use a darkish green shade. I won't remember the colors, but I think I'll make sure I put it in the description box below. When I upload the video. So yeah, it's going to be a dark green, a much brighter, like a lime green, and a little bit of pink to just bring in those a few pink elements that I had coloured in within the jar, and just to sort of help it tie in. And I don't think it's absolutely necessary, actually. Once I did the sprinkling, when I looked at it, I'm like, you don't really need to do the sprinkling. I think the picture looked complete as it was, but I think I liked that little bit of shine that I just added. Just, just a little bit of shine and sparkle. It's always nice on a page, isn't it? So yeah, I did the sprinkling off camera. Like I said, I'll add the colours of the paints in the description box below, so that in case you are trying to look for alternatives, you do want to do the sprinkling, you can look for colours that would work for you. But even if you just did a gold sprinkling, that would work with the colours that I've used on this particular page. I just happen to try and use different colours, but yeah, gold would look really nice as well. And that's the page done, guys. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a simple page to do, yes. And I just had fun using my pencils on this paper. The only thing I noticed was when I did the sprinkling of the metallic watercolor paint, that went through to the other side. Now, this is a one-sided book, so it doesn't matter. But I didn't expect it to go through because the paper was quite thick. But yeah, it went through a little bit, but I had my protective papers. So make sure whenever you're coloring, whether you're using alcohol markers or not, whatever you're using, just put some paper there just in case something you're using tends to bleed through and ruin the other page on the other side. Obviously, on one-sided books, it doesn't matter, but you don't want to ruin the following illustration on the next page. And yeah, so I always do that, but also because I've noticed ages ago when I first started colouring, that sometimes in certain books the black ink from illustrations tend to transfer, and in a double-sided book, that is a bit annoying when that happens. So putting that protective paper just makes sure that the black ink doesn't transfer either when you're, pressing really hard, putting hard pressure when you're coloring, for example. It should erase easily if it were to happen, but just something to keep in mind. So I hope you guys liked this color along. I know this was a book that was requested in my, it seems like such a long time ago, guys, but in my coloring options for the autumn seasons, which was September, October and November. And so yeah, I'm happy I managed to get around to this book. Hopefully you guys do have this book. I know quite a few did get your hands on this book. And yeah, if you follow along, as always, make sure you share it with me if you can, either by email. I love it when you guys email me and send me your pictures and say, look, I followed along and this is what mine looks like. Or if you're on Instagram, you can share it with me there. But it makes me happy. So yeah, make sure you share it with me. I want to see your versions. And I will hopefully be back with you guys again soon with another color along. If you guys have any suggestions of books that you would like to see, do let me know. But yeah, I try and work through the most popular books that were requested at the time when I videoed my coloring options videos. Anyone who requests videos, I try and note it down and I tally it up and then see which ones were the most requested and try and get those done if I'm in the mood to color them. Sometimes by the time it becomes, 2 months into my season of coloring, I look at the page I've chosen and I'll be like, I don't know why I chose that page. I really don't feel like coloring it now. So it does depend on my mood, but it does help as well to know what you guys are looking for. All right, I think I've rambled on a little bit, so I'll leave you guys in peace to watch the rest of the video, and I'll be back with you guys soon. All right, take care. Thank you for watching as always, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye. you.